Hey, everybody, it's Helen Moses, your voice and communication strategist. And I have another interview today with an amazing woman. This is also leading up to World Voice Day, celebrating our voices, talking to people who are just living what it means to use your voice and inspire others to do the same. Let me introduce you to my good friend, Lori Wagoner, who is an English teacher at a high school in the county where we live, and she teaches 10th and 11th grade English. Please welcome Lori.
Good morning, Helen.
Hey, Lori. My fancy introduction, but I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for the time. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you teach and why you do it?
Sure. Well, this is my 22nd year as an English teacher in public high schools, and I am a strong proponent of public education. And currently I am teaching two classes in the AP Capstone program. And the first is called AP Seminar. And despite its name, it's not a class where we sit around in circles and talk about things in a Socratic seminar type way. It's really a research fundamentals class that has some pretty awesome components to it. And then the second year of that program, the students move on to conducting their own research, and I become their 11th grade English teacher. And the class I teach at 11th grade focuses very much on language and composition and rhetoric, and looking at the ways in which the purpose and the audience of a piece affects the choices an author makes when they're composing that piece. And that can be whether the students themselves are the composers of the piece or they're examining someone else's work. So I've been doing that for the last 7 years, but always an English teacher. So,
and why English?
Well, that's an interesting question for me. I started out college as a textile material science engineering major, and certainly this isn't, I guess, 20 some years ago where I thought I'd be, but I got into the organic chemistry and calculus classes and thought, I don't love this. This isn't what I want. And so when I started to listen to that little voice inside of me, what do I really love? And what I love as a kid, I'd always read books. I would figure out a way to read in the shower. I would shampoo my hair with one hand and hold a paperback book in the other. And with the tip of my finger wet, I could flip the pages. So always books. And then as soon as I was old enough to start lifeguarding, I was coaching the swim team and teaching swim lessons. And then it was just kind of the marriage of these two things. I loved working with young people, and I loved reading. So I switched my major to English and never looked back.
Wow. Well, I was thinking about the fact that you teach 10th and 11th grade, and it just reminds me, and I have to give a shout out to Miss Lancaster out there, who taught English to me for 10th and 11th grade. I was lucky enough to have her for 2 years. Sounds like some of your students do as well. And I wasn't into language or English or reading or writing or anything, and until I encountered her in her classes. So what you do, I know from experience that the age that you teach, it's like you're in such an amazing position to inspire the voices of thousands of people, because they will also affect other people. And I just want to thank you, but let me just thank you and thank all of the other teachers out there, especially the public school teachers. I don't know that many of us stop and think how much we owe you.
Well, for me, it's a calling. I don't think it necessarily has to be, but for me it is. And it's a privilege. And when you talk about inspiring voices, I hope to inspire confidence in student voices and to validate the authenticity of their choices and views and perspectives, because it's not about, I call it sheeple. I'm not interested in students regurgitating back to me what they think my views are. I feel pretty confident in my own voice, but it's always, I'm trying to evolve and be better and learn and keep growing. But what I want students to realize is that they have a voice too. And I feel like the school is a place for them to practice it through their writing, through the speeches they give, through the things that they determine in so many ways are important and worthy of learning about. And if I can help empower them to do that and provide them with the skills to do that, then that's where the magic happens.
That's very, yes, magical and wonderful. And I just have to point out the parallel, I guess, between what you just said and something I've experienced in my own life. And I know I'm not alone because I've talked to a number of people about this. But in my life, you know, I haven't, even though I've talked a lot all my life, I haven't always felt that confidence that you were mentioning. And that was because, as I've reflected and gone back and looked, I always was dependent on external sources to validate my worth and if I could only have confidence if other people approved of me and of what I was going to say. And so a lot of what I said was exactly what you said. I was trying to say what I assumed other people wanted me to say, and I was trying to fit in that way. So kudos to you for inspiring this in students in such a young age, where they have that opportunity to start exploring and testing things out and choosing. You were saying, tell us about how they get to choose.
Well, that's what I was going to say, that I'm really lucky. The school I'm at hired me to pilot the AP Capstone program. And it really is just a phenomenal program developed by the College Board. When they were looking to develop this, they went to colleges and asked about skills that incoming freshmen were deficient in. And a lot of them had to do with, they didn't know how to research. They didn't know how to, college has a lot of group projects, and it became, there wasn't team cohesiveness. And, it was really just like this sort of discrete, you do this thing and bring it to the table. You do this thing, but not a real synthesis of all of the talents and opportunities. So when they developed the Capstone program, I like to say it's something that highlights student choice and student voice, because I teach them the research skills, but the students get to choose the topic. So Helen, if you're interested in language, right, you and your team or you individually could explore that with the skills that I've given you and the requirements that College Board has. And in particular, this class requires both a team presentation and an individual multimedia presentation where they've got a slide deck or videos or other things, and it requires them to have an audience. And so it's a really, really just incredible thing. I wish we'd had it when I was in high school, because, the kids get in and then they have to negotiate with their teammates. Hey, I want to talk about physician-assisted suicide, or I want to talk about concussions in the NFL, and I want to talk about protest songs and how they help uplift voices. And it really, it's anything out there. If there's academic research on it, these kids can explore those interests and present problems and solutions. And then in their teams, they say, okay, here's an issue. Here's what we learned about it. Here are 3 solutions, and this is the one based on our research we advocate for. I mean, that's amazing to have 15-year-olds doing academic research. They're in scholarly and peer-reviewed journals, and they're required to look at multiple perspectives and to voice those perspectives. So here's what teachers in this scenario might have to say about later start times, but here's what high school students versus elementary students. So they begin to see the nuance and the layer in problems, and they're not just Googling things. And so that's just year 1. And then when I get them in year 2, they take all of these skills, and it's really focused on argument and rhetoric, and looking at, the way, if I say something here and I put this really important thing at the end of the sentence, how might it change if I put it at the beginning of a sentence? So when Patrick Henry says, give me liberty or give me death, what happens if we switch that and he said, give me death or give me liberty? What's the effect? And we have to look at who he's talking to in that Second Virginia Convention, trying to convince those senators to go vote for independence. So why those words in that order for that purpose? And taking all of that in, it's just so exciting.
I'm like, can I take your class? I really want to go back and take your class. It sounds amazing. And what you're doing for these kids is so empowering, so validating. It's an internal source of validation for them. You are instilling that in them. It's amazing.
So. I hope so. And
yeah.
I mean, I've even tried to get away from, the nice thing about teaching an AP class is that there aren't core books that somebody somewhere in a building says, your students must read this. Because a lot of times that doesn't play into that student voice and, validating what they want to learn about. And I know there's a place for, hey, this is an important thing you need to know about the world. But, books and reading are so important to who we are and how we develop that sense of self. And in many ways, in establishing our voice, when we can see other characters. I mean, there's so many research studies about the power of fiction and developing our empathy and our confidence. And so when I can let students choose a book that, shows them experiences that either they haven't seen before and they're curious about it, or that mirrors their own experience in the world, rather than someone else picking a book that might not relate to them, that's pretty awesome too. But it's a new movement in education to move to choice reading. So,
well, yay. I think it's about time. I'm really happy about that. Let me ask you a couple of other questions about voice, since we are celebrating World Voice Day and taking care of our voices. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. You have to talk a lot as a teacher, right?
I do.
So what happens if you don't take care of your voice?
Oh, that's definitely something I've dealt with in the past. There are days, I forget to drink water and I find myself just tired at the end of the day. And I come home and I just feel, because I have to project. Sometimes I've had 42 kids in a class. And so projecting over the din and the cacophony, sometimes I have to strain and use my voice, and be louder than perhaps I'd like to be. So it can be draining, even emotionally, because, there's so much attached to what you feel like you're saying. And I notice changes in my tone if I don't take care of my voice. Sometimes I get sharper because I'm tired and I'm frustrated, and I'm very aware of, those kind of, I think I said it before, those nuances that come out. It's also very interesting to watch what happens when I drop the tenor of my voice or drop the volume of my voice, sometimes to save it, but sometimes to have a different effect. But, I've been fortunate, and I've thought about this. I had a student with a cochlear implant one time, so I had to wear a microphone that linked to the implant, but had a speaker too in the room. And I was amazed at how much better I felt at the end of the day, because I didn't have to push, right? And I didn't have to be so loud. And I thought to myself at the end of that year, when the tech services came and took all the technology out, I should get this for myself. But like so many things, it never happened. But it was interesting to think about how just the physical exertion of the changes in how I use my voice, how loud I have to be, and pulling that back is, I didn't realize the effect it had on me until I didn't have to do that.
Yeah, I think there are some kind of portable amplification tools out there that people can wear that help amplify their voice just within that room. But your voice as a teacher is critical. So how would you do what you do if you couldn't speak?
Oh, that would be, for me, particularly difficult because I am a talker. So yeah, sometimes, I mean, I've lost my voice, laryngitis, and had to teach. And it is either a whisper or I fall back to writing a lot. The nice thing about the Google Meet is that even though we were in class, I could pull up the chat feature and I could still use words to type and interact with students that way. Both Google Docs and Word have kind of, I feel like it's old cell phone commercials used to say, I talk, it types. It's the reverse. I type, it talks. And so I could fall back on something like that. And then the other thing I would do is just tap students to step in. You know, it's that sharing. I don't like to think of it as my classroom. It's definitely our classroom. And they have some wonderful and amazing things to say. And, you know, it's a little cliche, but I learn from them all the time. So ceding my voice and letting them step in can be just as meaningful and empowering and educational as me talking. Doesn't always have to be sage on the stage.
That's a great answer. I love it. I ask people that question because it's so easy to take our voices for granted.
Yes.
And I just like to inspire people to think, okay, well, if I didn't, because a lot of us have had laryngitis, you know, short times where our voices just weren't working, we were sick, or just happened and our voices weren't working. And so we've had to learn, you know, or write notes or things like that. But I just like to ask that question, and I love your answer. I especially love how you would include the other students and tap them to help. Which also brings me to what I want to ask you about your family.
Mm-hmm.
So you are a mom, and the mom, I know because we both have kids, the mom's voice is not always considered the best authority by children. But one of the things I think that we can do best as moms is not just to talk the talk, but to walk the talk and show them what it means to advocate for yourself, or what it means to, you know, to have that confidence, what it looks like, without actually saying, this is how you need to do it, kids. And I know one thing we have in common is that we both have taken, and I think you're still doing it, Taekwondo with our kids.
Right.
Yeah. So talk to me about what that means to you in terms of how it may affect the voices of your daughters.
Yeah, well, I mean, it started out as something that my oldest wanted to do because she wanted to do it. And I thought, okay, she was 5. And, you know, sitting in the bleachers, I thought, well, I can either sit here or I can start doing it with her if I'm going to be here anyway. So that's how we got into it. But as we progressed on, the studio we take classes at, if I can give a shout out to Lee Brothers of Raleigh, it's just phenomenal. And, you know, there are Taekwondo masters who are women who are leading the classes, which is important to me. They're commanding an entire room full of, you know, multiple types of people from all kinds of backgrounds. It's a really diverse group in all different categories, and that's empowering to me. And they are physically using their voice to command us, and that was inspiring to me. And then to see, as we've gotten older, the requirements, when my oldest daughter reaches a certain belt level, she has to start helping and start being an assistant in classes with the younger kids. And so to see her taking a small group of beginner students who are, you know, 5 years younger than she is, and working with them and coaching them and seeing that confidence that comes in, and then seeing her too learn how to take correction and criticism is also something that I think is important as we learn to develop our voice. When we hear someone saying things that need to be said, and she has been reprimanded, you know, when things weren't going right, and not in a cruel way, in an instructive way. and they've brought me in. So she sees the value of me hearing that, but also of what happens when those things get said and that why they're necessary to say. Because she will have to do that too, right? She will have to say to someone, this isn't the right thing that happens, and here's why. So when all of that gets modeled, really, again, it's such a phenomenal place. And I just am so thankful that that's where we are, but that those skills she's developing and then putting into practice some of the things that we do on the mat here at home. And I've noticed, trying to have better conversations, trying to listen more when they're talking and not just asserting my authority and saying, well, I'm the mom and that's why. But allowing them to ask questions. And my little one, who's a little bit, she's very confident already. But it's, as a mom, it's both frustrating and awesome to see her say to me, Mom, you interrupted me. Please let me finish. And as a girl, right, stereotypically in our society, that hasn't always been welcomed. And she's only 7. So I'm glad that she is developing with me in a safe way to say, wait a minute, you didn't let me finish. Because as women, I mean, we've got centuries of being spoken over, of being silenced, or being cut off. And so it's amazing and frustrating sometimes, if I'm being honest, but mostly amazing because I'm proud of the fact that she's developing that sense that I have a right to say this thing and to put this out there.
That's awesome. Yeah, at 7, I wouldn't have said, stop, you're interrupting me. I would have thought it,
Right.
and I would have been frustrated, but I would have just let go. I just would have retreated, I guess, in those situations. Good for her and good for you. That's fantastic. That's awesome. I love that. And I love I remember in Taekwondo, the voices, just that taught my kids a little bit about projecting their voices.
Yes.
My son at the time was particularly soft-spoken, and if you were the leader counting out the numbers and,
Right.
of repetitions or seconds or whatever, you had to project your voice.
Yes.
And that was a requirement. And he does that now when he needs to. If he doesn't need to, he might not, and that's fine.
Right.
That's him. But he knows how. And I'm grateful for that time to get them through. And then also, there are other things in life too that teach us. You're a teacher. I'm a teacher in a different way, not in a classroom. But we have this goal, this vision, I guess. I think I do, and I'm going to ask you about yours.
Sure.
For what we want to empower others to do. And I think you've already touched a lot on it already, but I would love to give you this opportunity to just share your vision of what you would like to see manifested through the voice of our youth, voices collectively, and all of that. Go for it, Lori.
Well, I think I'd like to see them engaged with the world around them. If I have to be honest, I'd like them to look up from the screen a little bit, because there are a lot of important things happening, and their perspective and their insights, I think, often get overlooked. I'm not saying they have all the answers, but they're definitely, they need to be part of the conversation. And so empowering their voices through the confidence that comes, in my case, through the research they've done, when they can say, no, I have, as the kids would say, I have receipts. I have the information, and I know that it comes from good sources. And I know that this research was done well. When they can come with that, then they can say, this is what I've learned, and this is why it matters. And you need to listen to me because I have this. And it's messy out there in the world, but it's so beautiful as well. And so when these kids can can enter into it, willing to engage in the conversation, knowing how to hear multiple perspectives, how to adjust their points of view when they learn information, and not, not wilt under, oh, that's wrong, but oh, wow, look, I learned something new. And now I can incorporate that into this kind of mental schema that I have, and then reprocess and readjust so that when I am speaking or putting my voice out there, I am constantly taking in this information and constantly reflecting on it so that, so that they're not stagnant. I hope that's
Yeah, I love it.
a good answer.
It's a great answer. It's a great answer. I'm feeling very inspired today with this conversation. When you go back to school, is there anything that we've talked about today that maybe you hadn't thought about before, hadn't thought about in a while? Is there anything else you might want to take back to your students or to your life?
Well, I'm thinking a lot, Helen, about what you said about students or about what happens when you lose your voice. And sometimes my head is like a pinball machine. There's so many ideas going back and forth. Like I think about, students, for example, back in the book, students who don't see themselves represented in text that we read, how does that affect what they're willing to put out into the world, right? If we don't show a beautiful array of texts and characters and situations, what does that do to validate what matters? And then I also think about some friends of mine who, when I was teaching in Virginia, after I left, they started in a sign language class, and they're offering that as one of their language opportunities. And then I start thinking about my school, and I'm like, we don't do this, but how cool would it be if, in addition to French and Spanish and Latin, students could take sign language as another way of not only learning and growing, but validating the ways that we can express our voice through, not just our vocal cords. So I think I'm thinking a lot about that right now.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for that. And thank you for this time. This
Absolutely.
has been a true pleasure. We could talk about this sort of thing for a very long time, but I hope that the people watching have been inspired by some of your words, by your voice, this conversation, applying it to themselves. There's a lot of stuff here, a lot of good stuff. And I thank you.
Oh, thank you
Happy
for giving
World
me
Voice
the opportunity.
Day. You're very welcome.
Happy World Voice Day.
All right. I'm going to stop it now.